Hey guys, Denise here. I wanted to just have a little chat with you, let's think of it that way, about something that we're all experiencing right now, and that is chronic stress. And, there's the situation that's going on right now. It's June 27th, 2020, and we've been in lockdown mode for a long time where we've been separated from family and friends and loved ones, coworkers, many of our associates. If you're used to teaching yoga, you're separated from your students. And, that's very extraordinary for us. It's sort of the cessation of life as usual, right? And so that is very stressful for us. So we can learn a lot actually through this experience that we're all having. It's kind of like a mini case study in a way. And, maybe that's going to help us for future reference. And, really the thing for me is to notice after this 4 months of time has passed, some of the manifestations of being in chronic stress that are starting to show up. And, it didn't even occur to me sometimes, where sort of these weird things I was experiencing were really coming from. So I'm really hoping I'm going to help you a little bit, help you understand how you've been feeling, maybe some of the things that are going on in your body that just don't even seem related, but they actually have a common root in this chronic stress that we're under. It's not really something we can do a lot about, but I do want you to know that we have tools. And if we understand our bodies better and how it operates, understand the nervous system a little bit better, then I think we can actually take steps that are going to help us quite a lot. So that's what this is all about. So, if you've been to yoga teacher training, I know that you've learned a little bit about the nervous system. Maybe you spent, an afternoon on it in yoga teacher training and just talked about the different divisions of the autonomic nervous system, which are governing our organs and gland systems and, kind of the hormonal system, really. Let's say it that way. Our housekeeping system and our systems that are basically there for our survival. And, I'm sure you understand that there's the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, and freeze system. And then there's the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, recover system. And you probably talked about the effects of that and how yoga can actually help us return or recover a parasympathetic state, right? That rest, digest, recover state where we're feeling, kind of calm, a state of equilibrium, if you will. And that is actually very much related to a state of health and well-being, as an experience of well-being. Okay, so that's kind of where I want to meet you, right there. And we want to talk about, how it is right now, like what is the nervous system doing right now since it's been under chronic stress for such a long time. Now, I know that, this whole situation as yogis, we're probably looking at, what are some of the positives, because that's who we are, right? We look for the silver lining. And there have been things, there is good that's going to come from this. We are all learning, right? And we're noticing our preferences. We're noticing where the rubber hits the road, I guess, for us, and learning, what are the priorities that are really true for me? And that's very important, I think. And, we're noticing things like, there's a lot less traffic, less pollution and noise and exhaust going into the air. People are saving time and money by, not working away from home. So, a bit more working at home, maybe more time spent with family. Homeschooling instead of regular schooling. These are all very interesting social experiments, if you will. And for some people, it's been really great. But for others, that has actually been another source of stress. So, people can experience the same thing, like homeschooling, as a source of stress or as a source of joy. It really does depend on your particular perspective. So doing things that are innate to human is actually a very healthy thing for us. So I'm talking about things like gathering in community, sharing experiences, working together, working with others, collaborating, that kind of thing. So when we're not able to do those kinds of things, it is quite depressing for us, even though things like social media are just a fingertip away. We are social animals, and we're definitely under stress from that lack of social connection and community, which is, as I say, it is innate to us. So it's built right into our DNA to have that be part of our health and wellness. That's just how it is. So not doing those things is going to affect us as well. So, it doesn't really matter what side of the fence you're on about, whether all this is necessary or, if it's strongly necessary and absolutely essential. It doesn't really matter because we're all experiencing stress, one way or another. So my purpose is to talk about what happens in the body and mind when we're under a situation that is chronically stressful. What are the mechanisms that are happening through the body? And, finally, we're going to look at what we can do about that. So I think, it's important to talk about this because we're going to see seemingly unrelated symptoms are all having the same root cause. And, as I said, some people will consider the situation stressful, and for others, it has reduced their stress. And stress itself is not all bad. We actually need a certain level of stress, and it's actually good for us. The main thing here is just to understand what that ratio is. What is the balance of stress? And we actually have a word for good stress and a word for bad stress. So if we're talking about something that is positively stressful, that's a eustress. It's spelled EU, stress. And then something that is kind of negatively stressful is a distress, right? So, but for this presentation, let's just talk about stress as being, the distress type. So most people actually use the word stress that way anyways. They're talking about stress. It's not very positive. We're talking about negative stress. Okay, so the thing that decides, for each of us, whether it is a good or bad stress is the mind. That is a decision made by the mind. And then the brain and the autonomic nervous system decides on how to respond to that. So where and how does this respond happen? Where's it coming from? Well, the brain, due to the thoughts that you're thinking, what you're being exposed to, images and circumstances, occurrences, the interpretation of that is sending electrical signals to the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain. And then the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which is it's actually your main endocrine gland, but it's in the brain. And that pituitary gland starts to send out signals to your other glands, your other hormonal organs, and then they release chemical messengers, could be hormones or other peptides and ligands and things like that. It doesn't really matter. You can just think of them as signals and messengers carrying signals. So that is going out throughout your body, through the blood generally, and it's telling your other organs and systems like your digestive system, your lymphatic system, cardiovascular system, those kind of housekeeping systems. And even your musculoskeletal system. It's telling them how to behave, basically. So right down to the cellular level. And when we're talking about the effects of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, these two have different jobs to do. They're basically both survival mechanisms, but they just have a very different approach to solving that problem. So you may have learned that the pet name for sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, freeze, and the pet name for the parasympathetic system is rest, digest, recover. And in yoga teacher training, we usually talk about, trying to recover or return to that parasympathetic state, your rest, digest, recover state. So let's just look at the effects of these two systems, okay? So your sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, is a very fast system, okay? It is designed to help you in an immediate survival situation, okay? Where your survival is threatened right now. So it helps us to take quick action or to freeze if that's the best course of action. You don't always know, and you may have a tendency one way or another. You may run for the hills or you may freeze. So We see this in the animal kingdom too. So this system works best in those sudden or temporary threatening situations, like, the tiger that's chasing you, or the car accident that you're trying to prevent, or like a sudden shocking noise, or a dog running out of the bushes at you, those kind of situations. And the brain and your nervous system doesn't really care about discerning whether it's a real or imagined threat. It's going to actually respond the same. You're actually going to get the same chemistry released, whether it's a real or imagined stress. And you probably know that from, near misses that you've had, like with a car accident or something. You get a dose of stress hormones when you have a near miss. So that's because your brain and nervous system doesn't really care if it's real or imagined. It's going to be ready to respond either way. So when you're aroused, you are under sympathetic nervous system governance at that time. So, you can also be aroused when you're excited too, right? So things like competing in sports or games or something like that, riding a roller coaster. Some people get really excited about that, or watching a scary movie. So things that get you really excited, you are going to elevate your sympathetic nervous system too, just so you're aware. So again, it can be positive or negative, but that arousal is happening. And it's, similar chemistry, similar reaction in the body, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So the sympathetic nervous system also, we know this about it stimulates memory too, in a very odd way. Because generally it doesn't help your brain function all that well. But we know from things like high stakes learning, and that would be, testing situations in school, right? How nervous you get about being tested. So if the stakes are pretty high, it kind of burns the memory into your brain. And we've seen this with trauma situations and stuff too. It's kind of like burned into your brain. When the stakes are really low, it's almost harder to learn. So again, this is it's kind of a survival mechanism. I know when I've been in foreign countries where I can't rely on internet necessarily, I don't understand the language, my memory actually works much better too. I remember numbers and places and things, my mind really grasps onto it because the stakes are higher and I don't have my usual resources around. So, that's something that could be a good thing. Of course, if it's a trauma thing, we'd rather forget about it. But anyway, it does seem to stimulate memory. So, what it does, though, overall, sympathetic nervous system firing, is it directs the blood supply, so that's your body's resources, to areas that are going to help you fight, flight, or freeze, which is basically the musculoskeletal system. So it's taking blood away from things like most of your brain function, especially problem solving, but also away from organs of digestion, heart, lungs, and your immune system. So those are your main housekeeping systems, digestion and lymphatic and immune system especially. And that's because this system is all about immediate survival, okay, from a perceived threat. And it doesn't matter if it's real or imagined. So you can just think about it. Okay, it's got to be quick. It's meant to get you out of there. And it doesn't really care about your long-term health. It doesn't really care if it's real or imagined stress. It doesn't really care about your health and well-being. It's only survival. That is its thing. So on the other hand, the parasympathetic system has a much different response. It's quite slow to respond, actually. And it's all about long-term survival and health and adaptation to your environment and the food you eat and things like that, so that your body can actually serve you better. So things like that take time. And it is our main housekeeping system. So think about how, it gets nutrition to the brain, to the hormone system, which governs, your cell behavior, your organ behavior. Very much your digestive system needs to be under the influence of parasympathetic. Your digestive system just doesn't really work under sympathetic nervous system firing. So, digestion is a complicated process, right? It's everything from chewing in the mouth and releasing the right chemistry there, churning in the stomach, and hydrochloric acid and other gastric juices have to be released, and it has to be the right balance. Then it's got to be absorbed in the small intestine and finally eliminated, after it gets through the large intestine. So there are many, many steps that have to be taken through that very long digestive tract. And you must be under parasympathetic, the system, governance, for that to happen well. Okay. So that's something let's just keep that in mind. It also helps us recover from exertion. So anything like exercise or, activity of any kind, the parasympathetic is the system that helps us recover and adapt. So if you're, exerting your body, you're pushing your body a little bit in order to get an adaptation response, you must be under parasympathetic, the system, in order for that to actually work. Okay, so that's very important. I'll get back to that in a moment. And so ideally, if we experience, a threat to our survival, and we do have that upregulation of the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, it's the parasympathetic that helps us recover from that and get back into balance and homeostasis. So these two systems can't actually be elevated at the same time. You can't have your sympathetic nervous system, really activated and aroused up here and get your parasympathetic up at the same time. That just doesn't work. They kind of do this seesaw thing. So, and because the sympathetic nervous system is kind of the boss of survival, it kind of pushes the parasympathetic off to the side if necessary. Okay, so, this is a problem because when a threat remains for months at a time, even, it's a low-grade threat, it might not, again, be a threat to your immediate survival, but it's just kind of always hanging over you as a threat, right? And if that is the case and it goes on for months at a time, you're definitely going to see some outcomes from that, because the balance, I mentioned that there was an ideal balance between your sympathetic nervous system arousal and your parasympathetic nervous system housekeeping system. That ratio is about 7-1. So you should be 7 times more time under your parasympathetic system as you are to your sympathetic. So 1 out of every 8 hours should be under maybe sympathetic arousal, alertness, and, maybe even in survival mode. But the other 7 have to be under parasympathetic. So I don't know if anybody's really achieving that these days. I highly, highly doubt it. So our goal then is to think about that. If we can't get back into a parasympathetic state for enough time, then, our basic housekeeping systems, our rest, digest, recover systems, are not going to be functioning like they should, and that is going to take a toll on our health. So here we are. We're in the case study, all together. So let's look at some of the effects we might be experiencing. So I talked about effects of parasympathetic and sympathetic, but what are the things you might feel in your own body, in your own mind, your own emotion? What are some of those effects? How does that play out? So let's have a look at that now. So we'll look at mental and emotional things first. So you could be experiencing irritability, or not you, but everybody else. And you might have mood swings, right? So one minute you might be perfectly content and happy. Next minute you're very anxious about maybe even the same thing, or you might be apathetic at the next moment. You might, if you're already prone to anxiety and depression, you're probably going to feel that even more now. And if you're not prone to it, this might be your first experience of it. You might also notice that you're having some brain fog, difficulty concentrating on one thing, and it's hard to make decisions under sympathetic system arousal, because it's going to be hard for you to consider all the variables for decision making. When you're under sympathetic arousal, you get very focused on the problem usually. And that prevents you from seeing possible solutions or creatively thinking of new solutions. Okay, you keep focusing on the problem and cannot see solutions. So that, again, that kind of perpetuates that anxiety you might be feeling. you can't really do big picture thinking. So that's the difference between being parasympathetic, like we're trying to do in yoga, and being under the sympathetic arousal. We can't big picture think. And probably a really easy way for you to think of what that might be like is having experiences like in your practice, maybe by the time you get to Shavasana. Have you ever like been lying in Shavasana, you're trying to just let go of everything, but all of a sudden you just have this big opening, a big realization or solution to a problem seems to drop out of the sky or something like that. And that's just because, you brought yourself into a parasympathetic state, and that's when the mind can do its creative thinking. So, and that's very, very difficult to get to that place when you're under sympathetic arousal. So let's look at rest and recovery. So you might find, like me, I've been kind of, fidgety and restless and stuff like that, and having difficulty actually resting. So tired, but having poor sleep, and low energy or energy swings. Sometimes I have so much energy, I don't know what to do with it. And other times I'm wishing I had more energy. So, and then poor recovery from exertion and poor adaptation. So, I've been trying to use this time to be in my body more, to actually challenge my body in some new ways, or ways that I haven't for a while. And I'm finding that I just don't bounce back as quickly as I ordinarily would. I have pretty good sense of how much to push myself and what I should expect from that, in terms of recovery. But that has been remarkably slow. So recovery system is very much parasympathetic. You have to be in that state to have good adaptation and recovery. So that's been a little bit frustrating, but I'm going to keep going regardless, because I have past experience that tells me that that's what I need to do. Also, digestion. Okay, let's really talk about that. Sometimes our low energy is partly because we're just not digesting and absorbing our food very well. So, that's going to affect, of course, energy and recovery. But also, if you have a sensitive digestion, already have some maybe food sensitivities and things like that, they can definitely be exacerbated. You might find that your elimination process might be a little bit out of whack. You might have diarrhea or constipation. You might have a lack of appetite, or you might have sugar cravings that you don't ordinarily have. And you might also find you have weight gain or weight loss, because we all kind of respond differently in terms of that. But it definitely, your digestion is one of the main systems that is affected by being under sympathetic nervous system arousal. And of course, that affects everything else, because that's your energy source. That's where you're getting your resources for your body. Next thing I'll talk about is the immune function. So we don't really think about how important our immune system is to us. It is an incredibly intelligent, adaptable system. Like, seriously, there is nothing smarter than the human immune system. But the immune system is not a big priority if a tiger is chasing you, right? So it is suppressed during sympathetic arousal. And stress hormones, it's really the stress hormones that kind of interfere with proper inflammatory response. So your inflammatory response, or your sort of first line of defense of your immune system, could be suppressed. Or it could be, if you do interact with a pathogen, that you'll have an overblown inflammatory response. And we have to remember, the inflammatory response is your body fighting off a pathogen. It is mounting a defense. That's what the inflammatory response is. Now, of course, it can get out of hand with things that we eat and lifestyle and things like that. But generally, that is our innate response to pathogens and invaders, we'll call them, to the body. So, and our front line of our immune system, so if you want to think of your immune system as kind of an army that's there to protect you, its front line is the respiratory tract. So nose, mouth, even the eyes and ears to a lesser degree, but especially the nose and mouth. That is where you have receptors that talk to your immune system and say, hey, I'm going to need some support here. So you have, you can mount a T cell response there. You can, and then T cell talks to other T cells, and, you get helper T cells and a whole bunch. So that it's kind of that it initiates. It's like, getting on the phone, calling up the troops kind of thing. That must happen through the respiratory tract and the mouth and throat, down into the lungs, into the esophagus, to the stomach, which, when you have an inflammatory response and, you've got, the postnasal drip and stuff like that, that's going into the stomach and being destroyed. And a lot of things are actually destroyed in the mucosal membrane of the nasal passages and the throat. So that is very, very important to keep that healthy, to have those passages open for full breathing, full inhale, full exhale, supports that chemical environment of the mucosal membranes. And that is your first line of defense. So I can't stress it enough how important it is for that free flow of in-breath and out-breath. And that is where your body is naturally, in its intelligence and in its full adaptability, is going to mount a defense for you. So that good, just really important to know, again, for now, but for later too. And then one more area we'll mention is autoimmune and allergies. So people who have autoimmune issues, everything from rheumatoid arthritis to diabetes to pulmonary disorders of various kinds, or even allergies. You might have food allergies or environmental allergies, or allergies to things on your skin even, and a lot of people have sort of allergic responses to stress too. They'll get stress hives and things. So, of course, you're going to be more sensitive to that type of thing when you're under sympathetic arousal. So I think that, again, is very important to know. When we're under sympathetic arousal, we're definitely going to feel, a bit more vulnerable. And if you have some of these issues, you may feel particularly vulnerable because, your immune system is not operating to the best of its ability. And if you already have immune compromise, then you're going to be even more sensitive than you ordinarily would be. So just good to know. So I'm really sorry in a way that I've painted such a dismal picture for you, but I'm just telling you all these things because you may be experiencing some of these things, and a lot of them don't seem related. It's just coming at you out of the blue, but we have been under chronic stress for a long time now, and it would be no surprise that some of these things would be showing up for you. So, if you understand it better, then I think, you're going to be able to take steps to help yourself. And so we'll talk about that now. So, you probably already know a lot of this stuff. I'm just putting it together for you here. We all, we're all dealing with stress in our own way, and we all have various tools available to us. But, if you teach yoga, that gives you a whole bunch of tools. And I'm going to suggest those and a few others too. And you might already be doing some of these things. So, first of all, let's think about what is it that we're trying to do. We're under chronic stress. What are we going to do? What we want to do, here's the thing, is get into a parasympathetic nervous system state and stay there for longer. So even under this chronic stress, you're probably getting into a parasympathetic state, maybe close to, but just not what you need to have your systems function well. So we want to improve on that somehow. Okay, so ideally, obviously, the best thing would be to remove the threat, right? But since we're not in charge of that, we'll have to try and remove ourselves, okay? And what I mean by that is maybe I don't know about you. I never watch the news, but I do look for information online. I have a few sources of information. And, if those things are kind of upsetting for you and you notice that it makes you more anxious and whatnot, then, just try to update yourself on the current information. It's important to stay informed, but I would remove myself from the constant stimulation of that. That might be, you might be finding it's a little bit too much. I've definitely had to make that decision for myself and just step away for a while and just give myself some time to recover and regain my equilibrium. So news coverage, social media, a lot of what's happening is kind of on the negative side. So again, stay informed, but then take a step back. Okay, that's what I recommend. It's a hard habit to break. I know, if you're a nightly news watcher or, you observe certain social media pages and everything, and that's your thing. I know it's hard, but hopefully you'll notice the benefit of it very quickly, and that will make it seem worth it. Excuse me. Can't believe I just did that on camera. Anyways, I just want to remind you that, focusing on the problem, like with that tunnel vision that chronic stress is going to give us, it makes us feel like we're just perpetuating it. Again, the nervous system is that's a signal basically to the nervous system that it's not time to let go of that sympathetic nervous system response just yet, that there's still a threat, right? So for watching things, reading things that make us feel that there is a threat, then your nervous system will respond to that. So we want to just take a step back from that if it's possible for us to do that. And then the next best thing is just do the activities that support that parasympathetic state, okay? The parasympathetic state is the state that creates health and well-being in the body. So we have lots of tools. And as I said, some of them are from yoga, but some of them are just literally simple, natural, human being activities. So I'm talking about things like daily rhythmic activities. So there's literally nothing more natural than walking for the human being. We're literally designed, or the architecture of our body is designed for walking with long strides and arm swinging. So if your walk is always, with the dog, it would be good for you to have another time to walk as well, where you can walk with long strides, no stopping and starting, and let your arms swing, let your trunk rotate, let your pelvis do its rotational movement, because that is very calming to the nervous system. It's kind of like a full body reset, and it's just simple, good exercise. You can breathe. If you walk outdoors, which I highly, highly encourage, you're going to be, breathing in and out through the nose and supporting immune function that way. So I can't stress it enough. It's very, very important. And I would try for about 30 minutes a day at least. And again, think of it as supporting that parasympathetic state. We really need to be doing that. Other rhythmic activities we can do, you could make your yoga asana practice a breath per movement practice where there's a sense of rhythm with the breath and that kind of thing. That's really excellent too. But even things like dancing, just put on some music that is happy and uplifting and dance it out for a while. And then, playing games, playing sports, things like that. Anything to get you moving, but particularly rhythmic kinds of movement are especially good. Okay, movement basically is essential. All your organ systems, all your body-wide health systems, that are supporting your health are benefited by movement. And, I know right now it might not sound that exciting. It might be hard to get moving, but I want to promise you, once you get moving, it's easier. So don't wait for motivation to come to you. I would always recommend you get moving, and motivation will come then. Okay? My promise to you. Okay, so now let's talk about the tools from yoga. We have asana, absolutely. Pranayama. So, there's ways of using breath, rhythmic breath, different pranayama techniques. I'm sure you're aware, if you've been to yoga teacher training, you know some of those, at least ujjayi breath, but other vigorous breath like Kapalabhati breath, or breath of joy, or, doing some rotational movement with breath. There's lots of vigorous techniques. So that helps to get more oxygen in the blood and give off carbon dioxide. Again, we're looking for that balance in the chemistry that supports the immune system. Also supports alertness without an agitated nervous system, okay? But then there's lots of pranayama techniques that are very soothing. So I'm thinking of Samavriti, Anuloma Viloma, abdominal breathing, 3-part breath, those kinds of things are very calming too. So we can use the breath to sort of judge exactly what we need right now, and we can use a technique that will support that. You can use your neti pot too. So that is, if you're not familiar, water and salt goes in one nostril and out the other. I'm sure there's lots of YouTube videos that you could look at for that. I wouldn't recommend overdoing it though, unless you have a lot of kapha. Someone like me, I'm very vata, so I would, maybe every 3 days or something like that, I would use the neti pot with a little bit of salt in the warm water, and then afterwards coconut oil inside the nostrils, because we don't actually want to dry out those mucous membranes. We can actually catch pathogens and viruses and bacteria and drain it out of the nose, because it actually stays there for a few days before it gets through the mucosal layer. So our immune system doesn't even really have to deal with it if we flush it out. But if you overdo it, then of course you're changing the chemistry of the mucosal membranes, and we don't want to do that. Okay. Other yoga tool is meditation, of course, but especially under the situation we're in where it's chronic stress, you want movement first. So I would recommend you do the movement, do a movement practice, asana, go for a walk, and then meditation, because your body is going to, it's going to do better if it moves. That is guaranteed. Okay. So I wouldn't sacrifice one for the other. I would definitely do the movement, but the meditation will be very nourishing. And you may not have thought of this, but mantra, the vibration of mantra, chanting mantra, or any kind of sound work, just, making sounds, oming, things like that, or singing, all of these that, because of the vibration that is created with vocalizing anything, can be very supporting to the immune function too, and calming to the nervous system. So, you may not have thought of that, but that is another tool for you. So, put on some music that you like, or put on some mantra, or just, if you know mantras from your yoga teacher training and your training, it's a great time to be enjoying mantra. I enjoy it in the shower. So, it's just it's calming for the nervous system, but it's also very practical because it is supporting the balance of those tissues in your respiratory tract and your immune system. All right. And now I'm going to give you some ways of supporting your immune function. So stick with me. This part's really, really important. It might surprise you that your immune system needs exposure to viruses and bacteria to stay sharp and adaptive. Now, why would I say that? It's because it's like every other system in the body. If you don't use your muscles, they're going to get weak. If you only eat like sugar, your digestion is going to be very poor. You need things like fiber and enzymes and things in your food to keep your digestive tract healthy. Your brain needs to keep learning, or it becomes dull, right? We need to keep challenging the mind. So all of our systems are like this. They need stimulus to stay healthy. And the stimulus that your immune system needs is what we call exposure. It means, not to isolate yourself and disinfect everything to the point where it's not exposed, because it will get weaker and it won't be able to mount the kind of response that you would want it to. Okay. Isolation means that we're not getting the exposure. So it depends on how strict you've been with your isolation, how many people you've been able to interact with, but just keep that in mind. So if you have been very strictly isolating and, it is time to stop that and get out there, just, give yourself a little exposure at a time, if that's possible for you, so that you don't overwhelm the system. You might catch a cold or something like that. So just give yourself time if you've been really strongly isolating. But even things like, digging in the garden and things like that is going to help you get a little bit of that healthy exposure that you really need. And, let me just mention that I'm not talking about those immune compromised individuals. If you have a condition that is immune compromised, that is your condition, I'm sure you're aware of it. You're under a doctor's care, and you've probably always had to deal with, protecting yourself in various ways. So, that hasn't changed. That's pretty much the same. And healthy people don't, infect people with immune compromise. So, again, it's like, staying home if you're sick, getting exposure if you're healthy, and if you're immune compromised, then take your usual steps to mitigate your exposure as necessary. Healthy immune system needs exposure, though. That's important to understand. Okay, so, things like just being with others in community supports our immune function. It supports our health and well-being, our emotional and mental health as well. Laughter, good breathing, daily exercise, fresh, healthy food, Those are things that support health and well-being. And I feel like we really haven't talked about that enough lately. That is what we should be focusing on, creating health rather than preventing disease. Creating health is where we need to put our focus. And, besides those things I mentioned, those human being activities in community, laughing, playing, being active, things like vitamin support might be something to look into. So vitamin A, C, D, and E, that's just in alphabetical order, not importance. But all of those vitamins are known to support the immune system. And then zinc and selenium are also known to be, feel free to look that up. You don't have to take my word for it, but those are really good vitamins to support immune function. So I think though it's just a smart idea during cold and flu season, be taking those vitamins, okay? And others too, if you like, whatever you like, but those ones are really key to immune function. Okay, so really that's all I have to say, guys. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a understanding of the landscape that we're dealing with, some of the variables, some of the things that might be going on in your mind and your body, and you're wondering, like, where's this coming from? It's just all part of what happens when you're under stress for this long. And I do want to give you these actionable steps. I want to encourage you. I know you might be struggling with motivation, but man, I promise you, once you get going, you're going to feel better. Once you feel like there are actionable steps you can take and it's going to make a difference, that's empowering. That is you taking your power back and, responsibility for your own health, which is really your birthright. So start moving and motivation will come. Remember that. And hey, I'm in this case study with you, okay? I'm having my struggles too. I'm definitely having my struggles. But I'm also watching with curiosity to see, what's going to evolve from this. We're all learning right now, all of us. And we're going to make different choices, I think, after this is all over. So my encouragement for you is focus on your health, focus on your well-being. We are human beings, extraordinarily intelligent and adaptable. And the more you trust and resource your body, the better it's going to be able to serve you. So support health in order for that to happen. Okay, so take care, everybody. Encourage you to get moving. Go for a walk right now if you can. And thank you so much for listening, guys. It's been a great. Bye for now.